So I'm joined by Christopher Buttigieg. So Chris is CEO ad interim and Chief Officer Supervision at the Malta Financial Services Authority, MFSA. And I'll ask Chris just to elaborate a bit on himself in a moment. I just want to remind those attending that you can post questions via the chat function, and I'll do my best to endeavour to answer them during the course of the conversation that Chris and I have. We're going to have a discussion around the Maltese initiatives around fintech and the MFSA's fintech strategy and how technology can help build supervisory capabilities. I think, Chris, maybe if you could just say a little bit about yourself, and then actually I'd like to ask you just one question, building on the last panel on KYC, AML, plus on what the Commissioner said before that, which is that the EU put a lot of focus on the revamping their AML framework to address recent supervisory failures. And I just wondered where Malta is with respect to AML supervision and what progress you've made on that. But maybe we just start giving you an opportunity just to introduce yourself.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Buttigieg, currently the Chief Executive Officer ad interim at MFSA and also the Chief Officer Supervision. I've been working with the authority for the past 20 years. I'm also the chair of the ESMA Data Standing Committee and a senior lecturer at the MFSA. And as probably you've noticed, my entire career has been in this field. So I'm quite passionate about the area of financial supervision and regulation. To address your question on AML, it's been one of our core supervisory priorities. We issued a vision statement in 2019 indicating what we intend to do, especially in the area of AML-CFT. We also issued a strategy document which indicates how we intend to take forward AML-CFT. And in 2020, we've done a lot of progress, primarily in four different areas. In the field of governance of the authority, we established an AML-CFT committee which discusses our progress in the area of implementing the various action points we have included in our strategy. We also established a financial crime compliance function, and we brought over an expert from the UK to head the function, and we've built it with 20 employees who are subject matter experts in the area, and we enhanced our supervision in the field. We've enhanced also our cooperation with the FIAU, which is the local financial intelligence analysis unit, and also the main entity responsible for supervision of AML-CFT in Malta. In fact, we are agents of the FIAU in AML-CFT. We also, to address other areas where we identified possible weaknesses, we also established a due diligence function which focuses not only on initial due diligence but ongoing due diligence of licensed entities, so not only at authorization stage but on an ongoing basis. We established a VFA supervision function. This is an area where Malta was foreseeing potential growth. In fact, we established a VFA framework, a virtual financial assets framework, so a framework for the regulation of service providers and offerers of crypto assets. And we established a specialized function to do the authorization process and also the supervision in this field. And we also established a cybersecurity function, which, all right, it's not directly linked to AML-CFT, but also deals with a specific type of financial crime. And we felt we wanted to have a specialized function with persons, experts in the field to support our supervisory efforts in the area of cybersecurity. So that's in terms of governance. But we've also updated our processes and procedures. We integrated AML CFT risks in Prudential. So FSA is the Prudential and Conduct Supervisor. As I mentioned before, the FIAU is the AML CFT Supervisor in Malta. However, AML CFT risks are a very important part of the entire risk framework that we consider when doing our work, and therefore we decided to further enhance our the AML CFT risk element within our Prudential work. And in this regard, we've updated our risk-based approach metrics in order to include the AML CFT risks, which are calculated and which are prepared by the Financial Intelligence Analysis Unit. And these form an important part of the risks which we consider in terms of our supervisory work. We also included an AML CFT element in general for all on-site inspections, which last year and this year have been and are still being carried out virtually. And we also included AML CFT within the supervisory review and evaluation process with respect to banks. So a major overhaul of our framework in order to enhance the emphasis on this area. We've also strengthened our resources to focus more on supervision in general, but also in financial crime. As I mentioned before, we established a new unit for financial crime compliance, and we've manned with 20 subject matter experts. But in total, we've increased our staff complement over the past year and a half by an additional 100 employees. And as you will appreciate, financial supervisors don't grow on trees, and therefore you need specialized skills, investigative skills, and analytical skills. And therefore we decided to establish a Financial Supervisors Academy, which was launched earlier on at the end of last year, and which we are now using in order to train our staff in different skills that they require, and also to ensure a certain element of continuous professional development in financial supervision. As I'm sure you'll appreciate, Daniel, the regulatory framework with financial services is constantly being developed by the European Commission and the European institutions. The ESAs contribute to this process, even through technical standards and through guidelines. And supervisory staff need to be on the ball, understand what's being adopted at European level, and be in a position also to supervise compliance with the particular requirements. So we felt that we needed to have our own academy, and we decided to establish the FSA, the Financial Supervisors Academy. And as part of the training, we also invite our peers in different jurisdictions to participate in the events we organize, and also not only participate in terms of giving lectures, but also participate in the events and get the benefit of this training. We've also strengthened our supervisory engagement as a result of the increase in resources. And last year, we've managed to double the number of inspections that we carry out. And in addition to increasing the number of inspections, we also strengthened our enforcement action. So where breaches have been identified, serious breaches have been identified, action has been taken by the authority. Part of the supervisory engagement is being done on behalf of the FIAU, and we have done a number of inspections, a significant number of inspections, and reported to the FIAU. Not only the FIAU, but we're also supporting the local sanctions monitoring board. And as part of our findings from these inspections, we also report to this board which eventually takes action at its end on the basis of those findings. Now, the investment hasn't only been in the field of human resources, but we're also focusing on technology. We have a technology strategy in place, which looks into data management, records management, but also a system which should allow the automation of processes. We're currently discussing with possible vendors in this area, and we're looking into the possibility of kickstarting this project later on this year.
And is that part, Chris, is that part of your more general approach to, not just in terms of AML, but also in terms of sort of the more holistic sort of vision you've had around supervision? And if I remember, Malta's established a sort of holistic look at fintech, and you had a strategy to establish a hub. And I assume this comes under under that sort of strategy. What's your assessment on the progress made more generally about implementing this strategy?
The strategy started off, our efforts in the field of fintech started off in the field of crypto assets. And in 2018, Malta adopted the legislation for the regulation of crypto assets. And eventually we developed our rule book, and we developed our regulations and our rule book. The initiative was taken by the authority as a result of the interest that we saw at the time by various operators to come to the jurisdiction and establish their business here. And we wanted to avoid having the Wild West on the island in terms of people coming over and leaving a mess behind. So we decided to establish this framework. The framework we took the high level requirements from various EU legislation, which covers securities business. In fact, we had decided at the time, and it's still the case, that we're treating crypto assets as an asset class for investment purposes. So we looked into MiFID, and we looked at the transparency, the prospectus regulation, and we saw how, and we found a way how to adapt these high-level requirements to this sector. Our primary concerns, or the primary risks that we identified and we wanted to address, were the investor protection risks, the cybersecurity risks, and also the AML CFT risks in the area. The framework has been in place now for around 2 years. We've seen a number of applicants that have come to the island. We are taking a prudent approach in the sense that we're applying strict due diligence processes to understand who's behind these applicants. We're also looking at their business models to make sure we're comfortable with the business models. And we're also in coordination with our financial intelligence analysis unit. We're looking into their processes for AML, CFT, and making sure that they have robust processes in place. So far, we've issued 2 licenses to exchanges, and we've issued 12 in principle approvals. So these are entities that are in the process of obtaining a full license once they satisfy our conditions. And then there are another number of entities that have applied and are currently being vetted. As I mentioned, we're taking a prudent approach. We want to understand the business models. We want to understand them well before going ahead. And there have been instances where we decided to reject an applicant, or where applicants have decided to withdraw once we've started probing further their applications. It's an interesting area. However, there are risks, and we're trying to ensure that those risks are properly addressed. We're very pleased that the European Commission has decided to move forward with the MiCA proposal. We believe that this is a proposal in the right direction. It addresses the risks in the sector in an effective way. There are a number of elements within MiCA which are already in our legislation. Indeed, our legislation covers most of the elements. And we have started a process to try and align the Maltese framework to MiCA. So that process has already been initiated. There are discussions internally and also with the industry to find ways how to align certain elements with MiCA. Again, we're constantly looking at how to keep our legislation up to date. So 2021, definitely you'll see some developments in the area of the virtual financial assets. Recently, we published a document which outlines the progress in this field. It's part of a series of documents which we're issuing on the way we're carrying out supervision and the way our regulatory framework is being developed. It's a series that we've titled "The Nature and Art of Financial Supervision." And so far, we have issued 3 volumes. The purpose is to keep the industry and other stakeholders, the consumers and the general public, informed about what we're doing. And we've issued the first volume on banking, we've issued the second one on virtual financial assets, and the third one on cybersecurity. And we're planning to issue more later on this year. But the one on VFA, I believe you'll find interesting because it outlines the progress we've done so far in this area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you say that you're updating the rules, and how many of these changes, or to the extent that you're able to talk, are down to sort of technological innovation changes or market structure vis-a-vis the draft proposal from the European Commission?
In terms of VFA, as I mentioned, we are currently looking into aligning with MiCA, but that process is still initiating. In terms of developments in 2020 with respect to fintech in general, we have approved the regulatory framework for the regulatory sandbox, and the sandbox is in operation. We launched it way back in July. At the moment, we've got 4 applications that are being considered, 2 of them proposing systems for their RegTech solutions, which look into anti-money laundering and compliance and in relation to trading platforms. So in terms of the major development from a regulatory point of view, it's the regulatory sandbox. Now we are planning a study to get an update from industry on whether they are seeing other developments in the field of fintech that we had proposed at the time when we launched the strategy, and that we're still working on now, where they are still in agreement that we should proceed in this way, or whether they have different views, and also in order to obtain the views of other stakeholders. We are participants in GFIN. We are participants. We are also members of the ESMA, the ESA committees that deal with fintech. And over there, we will also be obtaining the views of our peers on whether they agree with in general with the way we are proceeding in the area of fintech, or whether we should consider different paths in this regard.
Looking at this holistically, how do you assess being a first mover advantage? Because which is essentially what you've done in the VFA area. How does the ability to move first help small member states such as Malta to establish themselves as a centre of excellence within certain specific areas of financial services?
I think being interested in learning more, in understanding more developments within industry, and developing a regulatory framework is a means how to try and address the risks that might arise with respect to the particular sectors before these start operating in practice in the jurisdiction. It's a way how to be in a position to discuss potential applications with applicants before these start reaching our shores. So I think first mover advantage is more from a knowledge point of view than anything else, is trying to understand and being sort of a front runner in terms of understanding the risks, understanding the potential failures, also based on actual failures, because at the time, I remember when we kicked off the project, crypto assets were already in existence, and in different jurisdictions, there were a number of failures that had taken place. 2017 was the year where there were a number of failures of initial coin offerings and frauds that had happened. And from those experiences of other jurisdictions, we learned a lot, and trying to address those potential risks and the actual risks in your framework in order to avoid that similar failures happen in your jurisdictions. So being proactive to understand the risks and having regulatory frameworks in place which address those risks.
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect sense, and it takes a while to get that culture, I guess, through the MFSA. In terms of the supervisory capabilities, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, what's your view around the use of technology to build those capabilities? What more needs to be done, and how important is data to build these capabilities as well?
Both technology and data are fundamental. We've recognized this in our technology strategy, and we're working in order to ensure that we're in a position to implement the strategy effectively, to be more efficient in our processes and more data-driven in terms of our supervision. However, a point I'd like to make, and I'd like to take this opportunity, I think regulators should come more together in terms of trying to identify more areas of where there can be more cooperation with respect to the use of data, and that is available through various data hubs. I think if we come together and put our resources together, we'll be in a better position to develop technology which is more advanced, which would allow us to catch up with the industry and being at the forefront in terms of our supervision and the way we carry out our supervision. So what I'm suggesting is that if everyone goes his own way, everyone develops his own system, everyone can invest his own pot of money. But if we bring our resources together, our financial resources together, to develop a common system, especially at European level, I think we can be more effective in terms of the system we can develop and the tools we can have available for our analysis and for our supervision. This process of coming together has already started. I mean, at the level of ESMA, as I mentioned before, I'm chairing the ESMA Data Standing Committee. All the supervisors from Europe attend these committee meetings, and we discuss how we can better use, how we can develop further the frameworks that are already in existence, and new frameworks for data quality, because data quality is fundamental in order to be in a position to use that data for supervisory purposes. But not only, we're also exploring means and ways how to further develop the existing systems and how to make best use of existing resources.
Okay. Well, one final question, Chris. At last year's conference, and it builds on your point, lots of cooperation in the EU, but we heard a lot about the importance of international cooperation in fintech. What's your assessment of how that's gone the last 12 months, but particularly in the time with the pandemic? Is this still happening?
Yes, as I mentioned before, MFSA participates in a number of committees at European level, but also at international level. And the drive is there in order to develop cooperation and to work together in this area, and to ensure that there's more mutual understanding and better learning in these fields. So the cooperation has continued. It's fundamental, and actually I think COVID has made it even more important for us to better understand and to work together, because the technology has become even more important than before in order to allow us to continue with our work and to ensure that supervision continues to be carried out. So yes, I think from what I'm seeing, the cooperation has continued. It has actually been enhanced.
And is this formal or informal or both in terms of the channels by which this is taking place?
From an MFSA point of view, it's both formal and informal. I mean, as I mentioned before, we're members of committees, but we also keep in touch with other regulators on a bilateral basis to discuss developments in the various areas and also to exchange views. So it's not just the formal committees that exist, but also on a bilateral and informal basis. And all this cooperation is important, because ultimately, when a crisis happens, it's through that cooperation that we ensure proper market integrity at European level, especially within the context of the internal market.
Thank you. I appreciate the time you've taken out of your busy schedule. Thank you very much for sharing your insights, Chris. You've been very, very insightful. And let's hope this time next year, maybe this could be in person rather than remotely.
Yes.
So thank you.
Are there any questions from the audience, Daniel? Or
I've integrated some of them. There was just one question, if you have a minute or two, just on the your views around official cryptocurrencies issued by the central bank. So in the European context, that's basically the digital euro project that the ECB are running.
I think it's an important project. The digitization of currencies is the future. So I think it's something that will continue, and we'll be seeing other central banks entering this field. The push to reduce the use of cash as a result of concerns with respect to AML, CFT. I think all these pressures, and also what happened as a result of COVID, will continue incentivizing the central banks to continue considering and working on these type of projects. So I think it's positive, and I look forward to see further developments in these fields.